I'm going to go ahead and hit record for us today because we have some folks who are going to catch us on the replay. So very excited to be here. I'm going to give folks another minute or so to pop in and join us. But thank you to everyone who showed up. All right. Well, for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here on a Friday of all days to attend this wonderful workshop that I am so excited to host today on this beautiful morning. This is my first time doing this workshop, and I am so excited to share this information and also facilitate a conversation for us today about supporting young adults. And so the title of this workshop is Pathways to Purpose, Supporting Young Adults in Transition. And so my intention for this workshop today is really to talk a little bit about myself and how I became interested in specifically working with this young adult population and their parents, but also talking about why this particular age range, which I'm calling it 18 to 24, is such a cumbersome time for many of the kids that I've been interacting with who are making this transition from adolescence into young adulthood. And so I actually, what prompted me to host this workshop was I was having parents reaching out to me in my business saying, hey, like, do you work with this group? We need support. And it really kind of was brought forward to me that there's a gap in services that we often see when we are looking from like a mental health standpoint, a career coaching standpoint. There's a ton of support for our children and adolescents. And then there's really this gap between that 18 and into like solid adulthood, which I would say happens around the age of 25. And so there's this window that our kids are falling into that I feel like is often overlooked, and it is such a critical time. And I hope to share with you more about why that is today. So as far as Zoom etiquette, please feel free to unmute and interrupt me throughout the presentation. If there's a question or something comes up, I really encourage this to be as interactive as possible. I will be opening it up to the audience if you guys want to share and introduce yourselves. No pressure to do so, but again, I do find that these workshops are most productive and engaging when we're kind of having a dialogue back and forth versus me speaking at you for an hour. So yes, please feel free to engage as you see fit. Obviously, being mindful of confidentiality, that this meeting will be recorded and replayed for the folks who were unable to join us this morning. So just keeping that in mind. And yeah, happy to have you along for the ride.
So, I'm sorry, is it Elena? I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, Elena.
Okay, I just wanted to come off mute and introduce myself. So, my name is Suzanne Barton, and I actually have a son who's 18. He's a senior in high school. And I couldn't agree more with you that there is a major gap in services for this age range. He is currently working with an executive function coach, helping him really get through high school. That's
Okay.
the end goal is to graduate. But he's really uncertain with what he wants to do after graduation. He is neurodivergent, ADHD, and will probably take a non-traditional path. So anyway, his coach forwarded this webinar session to me. So I signed up right away and I'm really looking forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, Suzanne. I really appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I think you're definitely in the right place based on what you shared about your son and your family. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Hi, I guess it's my turn. My name's Natalie Carr, and similar to Suzanne, my son is in a similar position. He is going to be 18 in January, um, but same presentation. He's neurodivergent, ADHD, working with an IEP in high school right now. And he's really looking forward to going off to college. He's going to be going to a technical college, but wants to stay in the dormitory. So,
Yep.
so just getting him set up for that transition as well. And I actually found your information on a Facebook group that I'm a part of because I am a social worker as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Natalie, for sharing. I'm so happy to have you here as well. And thank you for sharing how you found me. I'm always curious how folks get to me. I just drop like nuggets in the universe and see what comes back. So really happy that you're here and excited to continue our conversation and share more information about how to support your kids and your family as they go through this transition. So thank you. I will go ahead and introduce myself then, for everyone. So my name is Dr. Elena Puff. My tagline is I'm not your average therapist. So I was trained as a psychologist, and at this point, I have over 10 years working with children, adults, and families across a variety of settings. My training is in school psychology, so I was always keenly interested on how I could support children from the time they were little, all the way up to graduation and beyond. And I always thought that schools were a great place to kind of meet them where they're at. It's where our kids spend most of their day. So I got a lot of experience in K-12 schools. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, I decided to make the switch and go for my doctorate because I really thought that the work that I was capable of doing was far more expansive than what I could do in a traditional K-12 system. So I gained experience working in hospitals, the legal system, community mental health. Eventually, I landed in private practice and decided to launch my coaching business, which is Flow State, in November of 2023. So I've been in business for about a year now. One of the things that I am particularly interested in is I really am passionate about working with neurodivergent individuals, kids, teens, adults. Myself being neurodivergent, I can understand the strengths and also difficulties associated with doing so. The other piece that I self-identify with is my business is centered around working with highly sensitive and intuitive individuals. And so these are our big thinkers and feelers of the world, and they often go hand in hand with being neurodivergent. So I'm really here to demystify this myth around being neurodivergent and how that might be perceived as a weakness in our society. I actually think there is great strength to it, and that is a cornerstone of my practice. I really come and use a holistic and strengths-based approach to help individuals understand that these things are not inherently weaknesses. We can actually utilize our strengths to bolster things that we might be struggling in. And so I like to think of myself as not the average therapist because a lot of the work that I was trained in was very deficit focused. What's wrong? Let's fix you. And the tagline for my business is that the answers are already inside of you. I believe we hold the capacity to heal ourselves. And so my positioning in my practice is really to help hold that mirror up and guide kids, teens, families, adults through that journey of healing so that they can, really reach their fullest potential in this lifetime. So I am just so honored to be here. This is my passion and my purpose for my life's work. So I just am excited to extend it even more into the community. Okay, so let's talk about current stressors that I'm seeing in young adults. So interestingly enough, in preparation for this workshop, I did a deep dive because I really wanted to understand from my personal point of view, reflectively, what I was like as a young adult. In retrospect, it wasn't that long ago, but it actually was. And I wanted to really understand maybe what were some of the things that I struggled with that I could help bring forward and see if that's consistent with the clients that I'm working with now. And so I was going and doing a deep dive of kind of some old like videos and photos that I had stored on my computer. And I came across this video of myself, my senior year of college. So for context, I was the first person in my family to attend college, and the whole transition in that process was, for lack of better word, a mess. Being first generation, my parents didn't have a strong grasp on what the enrollment process looked like. It was my first time being away from home from my family. And there were a lot of like conversations that were just not happening that really needed to happen to help ease that transition. So I like to use my personal experience as what not to do. And so I found this video, and it was of my senior year. I was taking a capstone course in education, and I had to record myself. And this was long before the days of Instagram and getting on and speaking at your phone. And one thing that I noticed when I was watching it was how I've always been pretty strong at public speaking based on my perception, but how timid and anxious I appeared. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks while I was watching it, because the person who's presenting to you here today was very different than the person on that video. I actually thought about putting it in here, but I was a little embarrassed. So I decided against it. But if you take my word on it, I seemed so lost and misguided. And the assignment was all around like what you want to do after college. And so what insight into just the confusion and uncertainty and just feeling like, I could still very much see like my adolescent self in that video. I looked at that as, that's not someone ready to enter the workforce. That's not somebody ready to go on and identify their mission and purpose. And it really resonated with me that I think for many of our rising seniors in high school, and even folks finishing out their undergraduate degree, they're not prepared. Most recently, I actually was teaching at the University of Arizona. I was teaching a graduate psychology training program, and even those students, when we were talking in class, they were identifying not feeling prepared to go out into the field of practice, which in this case would be the schools. And so there's clearly these huge transitions that are coming up from the time our kids are adolescents all the way up into young adulthood, and then even adulthood in some cases, where those transitions are not being fully supported. And I think that's really interesting in an area that we can kind of bolster and address. I think particularly for kids getting ready to graduate high school, this is a very stressful time, probably more so than ever before. And I'm going to explain why. So I looked to the research to begin to really understand, okay, what's going on here that might be contributing to why young adults are endorsing more stress, anxiety, concern than ever before. And here's what the research showed me. First and foremost, this population of kids, they are growing up with the internet, with cell phones, with social media, and really they're kind of our guinea pigs in some cases. And I hate to reduce them down to guinea pigs, but we just haven't had any data to back up what the long-term implications of having these social platforms are doing to mental health, to interpersonal relationships, et cetera. And so one thing that I noticed that was kind of surprising, that this group of researchers surveyed a group of young adults, kind of representatively across the country, and they found these to be the primary stressors. So the first one is actually really interesting. Environmental conditions was a huge stressor for this group of kids. And so what this means is when I speak about the general environment, just like what's happening to our world. Like that the climate is changing, that there's different changes going on to our seasons, that, is the planet going to be viable 50 years from now? This is actually something that's really weighing on this group of 18 to 24-year-olds, which I thought was super interesting because I think back to when I was that age and I, could barely get a bottle in the recycling bin. So it's really interesting, kind of this existential worry that this population of kids is endorsing. And it's really things that aren't inherently in their control because it's very systemic. Similarly, another element that was endorsed as a primary stressor was the social and political change and climate. And so this is, again, speaking more to like existential crisis around, what's going on socially in our country, what's going on politically. Like, a big conversation that I was having with a lot of my teens in sessions last week was like, a lot of political anxiety around like, is FAFSA going to be there when I get to college? Like, just some things that, the uncertainty of the social and political climate, regardless of where you fall, is trickling down into this group and really looking at like, is a four-year college going to continue to be the norm, or is that changing? My hopes is that it changes. I think the way that we're going right now is completely unsustainable from an education standpoint. I understand for some people that might be a very useful track, but it's not for everybody. So I'm much of a candidate where I'm like, let's find like what aligns most with you and go after that. Other stressors that young adults endorsed was financial constraints and uncertainty. So again, going back to kind of the economics of the world, is there going to be a job for me waiting on the other side? Am I going to be able to afford the cost of living? Being able to like really navigate the financial constraints of just kind of being in that early stage of independence and, hoping that, you can have support from your parents, but in some cases that might not be guaranteed. So again, that was something that I thought was particularly interesting. And then this last one is probably like, as a psychologist, this is where it really piques my interest. A stressor that they endorsed was this concept of loneliness and relational challenges. And for me, when I read between the lines, I think this goes back to the internet and social media. This generation of young adults are endorsing the highest levels of loneliness to date, which I think is particularly interesting, being that you're constantly connected by this little device that we like keep on our hip at all times. People are feeling alone. And this isn't just in this group, it extends, both ways into teenagers and up into adults. And so what I'm noticing is that for this population, the kids that I've already been able to work with, they're struggling to build really meaningful relationships because they're not understanding how to adequately connect with someone face to face in the flesh. There's a lot of social deficits, and this could be traced to numerous things. I think the pandemic definitely has something to do with it. I mean, this group was in a very formative age when that was happening a few years ago, that they might have missed out on some developmentally, some of those skills. But I just think for this group, everything is so driven by what's going on social media and on the internet, that there are just some transferable skills that are not coming forward that I think is taking an already challenging transition and making it that much more challenging. And so for me, that last bullet point, is really the one piece that I feel out of the four listed here, that really is within our control. And is probably, in my opinion, the most important. I come from the camp of being able to foster and facilitate connection with others is what keeps us going. We are not meant to be lone wolves as human beings. And so I think this is really important to kind of think about, because while there are some elements listed here that, again, are out of our kids' control and are more existential in nature, as I had mentioned, really being able to focus on things that are within their control is kind of how I broach these topics and help them find some resolve around them. Okay, so I just created space in my presentation. Um, Thank you, Suzanne and Natalie, for already introducing yourselves. I wanted to take a moment and maybe open it up again, since you kind of already shared a little bit about your children. I wanted to take a moment and talk about, maybe from your perception, what their greatest strength is. So something you think they're really bringing to the table that is noteworthy and really impactful for them? And maybe what is your biggest concern as their parent? Maybe what brought you here today?
I can go first. As I mentioned, my name's Natalie. My child is 17, going to be 18 in January. His greatest strength right now is he's really good with working with technical stuff. Being neurodivergent, that's what he seems to have gravitated to the most, is anything hands-on. He's very curious about um, seeing how things work and finding out how he can do that on his own. So he's really good with anything with computers, anything with auto, anything that he can, spend time getting his hands on. The biggest concern that I have for him is that for a large period of time, he was very isolated. So that relational piece, he didn't really make many friends until really this year. So going into college, just having those friend groups and also some of the like the core life skills. I'm a single mother, so trying to teach him those core things like cooking, cleaning, but then also having the mindset that I am also neurodivergent, and I have ADHD, that we kind of clash. So my feeling of when I need something done is not the same as his.
Right. Oh, I hear that often.
And then on top of that, I think another one of the concerns that, along with the list that you had with the environmental concerns and everything, is transportation. He is not really
Mm,
wanting to learn how to drive.
yeah,
And that's something that's, kind of a problem because I can't drive him everywhere if I have things to do too.
right.
So just learning all of the, mapping out of the city, local transportation, how he can get around himself.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think those independent living skills are one of the most frequent things that parents come to me, just like I want to make sure that they don't burn the house down when they're trying to make themselves, breakfast, or burn the dorm down, or, being able to navigate public transportation, or the driving is a huge thing. Like I've had to force like my teen clients to really, like, we've had to work very diligently to get them to feel empowered to drive. Which in some cities, that's just you just have to. There's not many options alternatively to that. So I definitely resonate with some of the things that you're sharing. So thank you.
So I can go next. Natalie, it's so nice to have you share as well. I think that being a mom of a neurodivergent child can be very lonely. So I think our kiddos experience loneliness to some extent, but the parents do as well. And that's really hard. So I would say for Brady, he's got a lot of similar strengths. He's very innovative and technical, hands-on and curious. I mean, the kid can sit and put together, these like Lego Technic sets that takes him, weeks, and he can sit for hours at a time. But yet sitting in a classroom trying to do chemistry is like literally painful for him. Trying to sit and do homework after school is super painful, and painful for me as well, let's be honest.
Yeah, right.
It's really, so he has that sort of, hyper focus ability, which I think is a strength, right? But it also can be a weakness. So I noticed that, he's actually very social, which is, you know, I'm happy about, but he can get really caught up in his cell phone and screens. And I guess, I just fear that he'll have he'll have trouble launching, right? That he'll, be sitting in his room just on his phone all the time after high school, and he'll get stuck making the next steps. And so I just worry about that. I have a daughter, just for context, I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school, and she's not neurodivergent and, way beyond him in terms of just maturity and I don't have to harp on her for schoolwork and all of that. So that's just sort of the context from which I'm working. And yeah, so great stuff and challenges as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. I do always like to identify, as I mentioned in the creation of my business, I think neurodivergence has this perception that you're lacking something, but it also comes with such a gift. And I think you both have shared, that for your boys that they have this really keen gift. I mean, if you put a Lego set in front of me right now, I'd probably need like 6 months to put it together. I mean, it's just like differences in how our brains work, right? And so
Yeah.
I think identifying those things is super important while also, advocating for, okay, they're going to need some support because here are some challenges that we're observing. I think you both bring up another really important point that I wanted to stress in the context of this workshop, which is there's a reason that I invited this for parents. And Suzanne, you brought it up when you first got on here around the isolation and loneliness of just feeling on an island. Because, even when your kids are moving through traditional K-12 schools, you have some connection, if they're in any kind of clubs or activities or your neighbors, but then once they graduate high school, it's like, all right, well, I think society still perceives, generally speaking, that once your kid turns 18, it's like, all right, good luck. And I think that's a very antiquated way of looking at it and just not truthful. I mean, they're always going to be your child, right? That's the whole principle. But it's really helping you guys as parents navigate how that relationship might need to start looking different. Because I think that's a really hard line to toe of like, when am I being too overbearing and I could potentially be enabling these behaviors or these things that I'm concerned about? But when do I know when to pull back? I don't want my child to feel like I'm abandoning them or kind of isolating them. And so it is it's a delicate back and forth that I have coached a lot of parents through. And I think that it's important to come together as community and realize that you're not alone. And so that is definitely something that I can talk about later in the presentation that I think is important to facilitate and something that's on the horizon for my business. So thank you for sharing. I want to go ahead and transition to a case example. So I'm a very practical oriented person. And so I wanted to just like give you really practical information of a previous client that I worked with, her and her family. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Julie. And I think this will be really helpful in kind of visualizing how you can begin to take some actionable steps to feeling not only more prepared within yourself to help your child with their transition, but also help them feel more empowered to make this transition as well. So Julie, she was a freshman at a large public university. She was diagnosed with ADHD when she was a little girl, but I had worked with her through high school, and that's when I met her. And we really worked on a lot of executive functioning strategies. We really worked on a lot of self-confidence, really understanding that like ADHD was kind of like her superpower, because that's how I frame it to her and something that I really wanted her to embody. So she ended up doing really well. She went from C's and D's the beginning of her freshman year, and by the end of high school, she graduated within the top 10%. She was a bright girl. She was very intelligent. She just needed, like, it was all the pieces of the puzzle were there. She just needed someone to help her configure them. So it was wonderful to be able to help support her with that. She was really excited to attend college. She was going to a college close to home, so it wasn't like a huge distance factor there. She talked about wanting to go to college because that's what most of her friends were doing, which again, developmentally speaking, that's pretty on par for being 17 or 18 years old, which can be problematic at times. And I've run into a lot of kids where they're like, well, that's what everybody else is doing, so I guess I'll do it. But she, I thought she had the skills to be able to go and be successful by living on campus somewhere and doing that first freshman year. The issue with Julie was that she didn't really know what she wanted to do. And I could identify with this because when I moved away to college my freshman year, I didn't really know what I wanted to do either. And so I worked with her parents on, really coming up with a plan where Julie would immerse herself in a variety of classes that first year. Introductory classes where she could kind of dip her toe and see if she likes it. But her dad, he was a big businessman, and he was like, I think you need to study business, Julie. And despite my urging to kind of broaden that scope, she decided to go mainly into some of those business classes, which is something that I see very often from families. If dad is a lawyer, it's like, well, this is a stable career, you should do it too. And so I definitely coach families a lot around projecting our own aspirations, whether we've met or not met them, onto our children can be incredibly problematic, because what ended up happening was a few weeks into that first semester, Julie got on a call with me, and she was having severe panic attacks. Now, these panic attacks dated back to her freshman year of high school, and I had not really seen them in literally years, but they reemerged. And it was happening a few times a week. She couldn't identify when or what the trigger might be. She was having terrible sleep difficulties. She couldn't fall asleep. When she did fall asleep, she couldn't stay asleep. She was exhausted, so keeping up with her schoolwork was a nightmare, and so her grades started to decline. She began isolating in her dorm room because now there was all this embarrassment of like, I don't know what's going on in my classes. I don't have the self-advocacy skills to go to these big scary professors and ask for help. And it was kind of this perfect storm spiral. Her parents were livid. They were concerned about their daughter, but they also were like, we feel like we're literally wasting our time and money. Like we invested in all this support through high school. And now you're just decompensating right before our eyes, which I can understand that completely. So her symptoms, the things that were going on, eventually intensified to the point that she made the decision to move home, and she dropped out. And so that's when, her and I really re-engaged in services again. And it was one of those things where, this is kind of what prompted my passion, this family, around working with this particular age range, because I think, again, Julie represents a really important example in the sense that even if you have a really strong foundation as your child moves through adolescence and high school, this transition that we are just expecting young adults to make is multifaceted. It's complex. I think, Natalie, you brought it up. Like, it's not just going to school and learning, it's now living on your own. It's now having to navigate transportation. It's knowing how to, if you snooze your alarm 15 times, you're going to miss your class. Like, there are so many life skills woven into this, and so much reliance on things like executive functioning that without the proper support, we find our kids are just crumbling. And unfortunately has real longstanding consequences. I mean, Julie basically got no credit that first semester for her classes. Her self-esteem plummeted by having to move back home because she perceived and internalized all that as failure on her part. So we had to go back to the drawing board a little bit. And it really gave me pause of, if I could go back in time and do something different with Julie, what would I do? And this is what I would do. So I came up with a protocol. I decided, all right, we have to do something. We can't just, treat this as like a traditional therapy model where we address the symptoms, we get her panic attacks. Okay. We really have to get to the root of what's going on here. She's neurodivergent. She's got these gifts. She's a bright girl, but like, what else do we need here? What's missing? And so I came up with this very specific protocol that I use this for adults, but this is really built out of a young adult profile. And one thing that I think is really powerful for young adults, at least for many of the neurodivergent ones that I work with, is numbers, data. You can't hide behind numbers. I know for me, when I was around this age, 18 to 24, I thought I was tough. I thought I was like, I had it all together. I could talk a pretty good game, like I was like, I'm fine. Like, I'm only 20 years old. But I feel like what is really powerful about using data and assessments to better understand yourself is that you can't refute numbers. And so what I did is I came up with a battery of assessments that really looked at kind of a variety of measures within a young adult's profile. So more specifically, what I've looked at is I did assessment that looked at their strengths. So a strengths finder assessment is beautiful because it not only kind of analyzes their self-perception of like, what am I good at? What are my natural strengths? But it also does a deeper dive of how those strengths would actually transcend into something like a career. So for example, the strengths that both you ladies identified for your kids as far as being very hands-on and manipulative, what does that actually transcend into in real life, beyond just building Lego sets, let's say? The other thing that I really incorporated into this protocol was a personality measure. So I think looking at our specific unique personalities is like looking at our, fingerprint. Everybody's a little bit different, right? There's no two that are the same. And so looking at major facets of personality, looking at how you respond to stress in your environment, looking at how you navigate relational type issues. This level of insight is so profound for this population of kids because up until that point, there's nothing that really outside of maybe a Myers-Briggs that your high school counselor gives you. There's nothing that's this level of depth that really gives you insight to why you are the way you are. And but at this point, 18 to 24, personality has really stabilized. So it's not changing, or it's likely not to change in any kind of major way. So getting that data out on paper and kind of looking at your unique fingerprint, I call it, is really insightful. The other piece of it is also looking at, an assessment that looks at flow. So my business is called Flow State. And one of the reasons that I named it that is because in psychology, there's actually a term referred to as flow. And flow is when you're engaging in an activity where you become so absorbed in it that you lose track of time. It's similar to hyper focus, Suzanne, but it can also be redirected into something that is professionally oriented. Like, for example, for me, what I didn't realize is when I was meeting with clients and families, the hour would go by like that because I was truly in a flow state. I was just, being there, engaging in conversation, coming up with ideas, and I would literally lose track of time and find so much enjoyment and fulfillment out of it. So there's a flow finder that helps individuals identify where those flow states are actually coming forward, and how we can map that onto a career or a job or something that really lights your child up. And so for this, I really come at it from the perspective of, I do believe that, research supports this and my own lived experience supports this, is that when you find something purposeful, something that lights you up, something that gives you meaning, and you can attach that to a way to make money, that is the recipe for success. I think, that this generation in particular is pushing away from the conventional 9 to 5. I mean, there's a mass exodus of people leaving education, healthcare, who are in pursuit of whatever lights them up. And I do believe that's the future. I think that finding and cultivating space for our kids to be able to do things that they enjoy, that they love, is here to stay. And so that is something that I really help coach my clients to, navigate that. Maybe in some of the things, they find, like I have a 22-year-old who loves marketing. And, for me, I'm like, I don't know how you find this enjoyable, but he loves it. He loves being able to be in that creative flow state as he's putting things together for different clients. And so it's really unique to that individual. So again, we take all this data, interviews with the parents, kind of this general like lump of data, and I help filter that down and make sense of it. So really what I do is I come up with a specific analysis of like, okay, what are your like strengths? What are the things that you're inherently good at? What is working in your advantage right now? And then what are areas that you might need support in? And how do we harness those strengths to fill the gap in where you might need support? So it's bringing that information together and coming up with an action plan. And from there, we really get into the weeds of identity development and purpose development. Another component of this age range is that these kids are not only navigating the transition out of high school and what do I want to do for the rest of my life, but they're also navigating elements of who am I? Who am I when I'm not a brother, a sister, a son, a teammate, a high school senior? Who am I as an individual? And like that in and of itself is, could send you on an existential spiral. So a lot of this is not just about, okay, what job and career and life skills are you going to develop, but like what kind of person are you going to be? And as parents, it's definitely anxiety producing, or it can be because you're sitting there going, I want you to be a decent human being. Like I want you to contribute something positively to this world. And so that can feel like a lot of pressure to our young adults, is not only being able to navigate the very concrete logistical, I need to go to school, or I need to get a job, or I need to get an apartment, but also like, who am I? Like, what do I like to do when mom and dad aren't around? What, am I going to go sit in my room on the phone after work or after school, or am I going to go put myself out there? So part of this protocol is not just directing them into a specific career readiness track, but it's really helping them understand who they are and what fills their cup up, which I think is the greatest gift of all, is that level of insight. All right, I'm going to pause there. Do you guys have any questions or need clarification on anything?
I don't have any questions. I think this is fantastic information. I think there's such a lack of career exploration opportunities in high school for these kiddos. And so it's just really hard for them, especially our neurodivergent kiddos, to, you know, translate their skills and strengths into a path that seems reasonable and attainable for them. Um, so anyway, I really like how you're going about this protocol, with this age range. I think it's really, really necessary for them because they're not getting it in high school, at least not at our high school.
No, it's consistent. I haven't heard of one high school that's really doing an in-depth, like outside of a Myers-Briggs. Like
Right.
that's not particularly helpful. That doesn't translate into action steps. And I think for me, I look back on my career, like I created my business a year ago. And that's truly like I finally landed well into my 30s. I finally landed where I feel like most aligned and in my flow. However, it took literally over a decade, more than that, of trial and error, of trying to figure out where I was supposed to be, how it aligned, who I was. I mean, I literally went through this process. And, looking back, everything happens for a reason, right? Maybe that I had to go through that to be here with y'all today. However, what if I could take 13, 15 years of kind of fumbling and trying to land somewhere? And what if I could boil that down in 3 hours and get your kid crystal clear on where they need to go? Like if I can offer that, then that, I can't gatekeep that, because for me, it was such a labor intensive process of trial and error and trial and error. And it was because I didn't have the data. I didn't have information. I didn't have clarity on myself. I was just doing what my parents thought I should do. I was doing what my mentors told me to do. I was just trying to like get the answer from anybody but myself. And that goes back to my tagline, which is helping folks tune into their own intuition, that the answers are in there. You know what you want to do. Even if like up here you don't know, like
Mhm.
you have that guidance. And so just slowing that down and giving that information, bringing that forward, you can land where you need to be, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, that's so nice. I mean, I think with these personality tests, Natalie, I don't know what about your experience, but in our high school, the kids take those, but no one sits down with them after to go through the answers. I mean, I don't even think Brady has ever looked at his results.
Yeah.
So it's just not useful.
Yeah. No, I've heard that before. Natalie, anything to add?
Yeah, at my son's school, they have kind of been trying a little bit. Not only do they have the personality test, but they have included classes like psychology and sociology that kids have the option to take and learn more about themselves, which kind of helped my son a little bit because they would do, like the behind the mask activities to find out more about, what they feel inside and what's portrayed outside.
Nice.
Um, the thing with kids like my son, though, is it's hard to have express that outwardly to other people.
Right.
So when they have the prompts in English class, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do over the summer even? Or what do you like to do in your free time? He has a hard time answering those questions. He doesn't know what he really likes. He tells me he doesn't know who he is. So it is the self-identity part that he's kind of hung up on.
That's so hard, but it is so consistent with what I hear. And I have such empathy for that because, they're both of these boys are at a stage where they're trying to figure that out. And, there's not a ton of opportunities to really unpack that. And bless you guys, your guys' hearts for even being here today and being an advocate for your children. You may be the last person they go to just because you have the title mom across your forehead. So just sometimes having that outlet to like of a third party who's like not attached to, the family or anything like that is it's a neutral party who isn't gonna, they don't have to be at dinner later is really powerful. And I just both of your boys are very lucky to have you guys as just, trying to get information and better understand how to support them. It is it is truly admirable. So thank you. So I wanted to just kind of end my presentation today with, and then we can open it up for discussion and questions. One of the things I'm actually launching this today in the business, I'm calling them my half day intensives. And so what I'm doing is I'm typically my coaching clients were the only ones who had access to kind of this protocol, but I really have been feeling called to open this up. So this is an opportunity to gift your child with that perspective of clarity, to engage in this protocol with me. It's about a 3 to 4 hour intensive session. So it's a time where we block out a few hours, and it can be broken up too as well, because that's a long time for anybody, where we engage in the protocol that I talked about today. So as I mentioned, I use a variety of assessment tools to really help identify strengths and values for your child. So what are things that are important to them? What are their areas of inherent gifts and strengths? We engage in the gold standard personality assessment. So I use, the most well-normed and documented personality measure and provide a thorough interpretation of those results. I give them a career inventory and then also interpret those results based on the information that I already have. So it's not just based on that measure alone. It's really comprehensive in nature. And then I do interviews, not only with your child, but also with you. Because again, as one of their greatest advocates, I want your input. I want what keeps you up at night. I want to know like what you're bringing to the table, what you're struggling with, because so much of this, as Suzanne mentioned, feels kind of like on an island as you're sending your kid off to this huge transition. So it's not just about your child, it's about supporting you and your family as well. And so as far as what engaging in this, what they'll walk away with, insight, a better understanding of like of their gifts, like what makes them so special. You would be shocked how many times I ask my clients, what are your strengths or what are your gifts? And they don't know how to answer it. Good at math, I guess. Like it's very fascinating to me that for many of us, not even just our kids, they don't know what their strengths are. And so by giving it in their face, concrete data to say, here's what you're good at, statistically better than the average human at, it does so much for their confidence and sense of self. You kind of see them like they like puff their chest out a little bit. And it's like, okay, like I can see that. Like, okay, let me really embrace that. They'll walk away with a deeper understanding of their purpose. Again, I think understanding how your strengths and your purpose go hand in hand is the recipe for success with this. So really, what am I meant to do? Well, I'm meant to use my hands to create, to help others. Boom. What career aligns with that? How can I put that into practice? And that brings me to the last point is they'll walk away with clear, actionable next steps. So the folks who have engaged in this protocol, I'm really breaking it down bullet point by bullet point of like, here's where you need to start, here's where you need to go next, and here's where you need to end up. and make that really individualized and specific to that child and that family. And so it's a no nonsense, not attached, one and done kind of thing if that's what seems appropriate. But you're walking away with that clarity, not only for your child, but for you as the parent of like, okay, what can we start working towards? How can we do some goal setting around this? How can I support them? And I think one of my greatest unsuspecting outcomes of doing this protocol is I asked your child if they want to go ahead and share the results with you, the parents, and most of them say they're more than willing to. And the parents getting clarity on their child. I mean, your child better than probably anyone else. But again, having that data to back it up is really, it's been really interesting to see how parents are like, well, that makes sense. And so that gift of clarity is one of the greatest things that we can do for not only our children, but for ourselves. And so I'm really excited to be offering this. I'm doing a special workshop pricing for the folks on the call today. And then within a week of this recording being released, you still will have access to that special workshop pricing of only $500. Again, this is a really heavy lift assessment battery that I'm putting together. And I'm really excited. I just want to be able to get this to people who feel like it could be really supportive in helping their family.
So Elena, can I put my email address in the chat because this is my work, I'm on my work Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would definitely need to talk to Brady, and I know that he would have to break up the 3 hour
Of course,
session because there's no way he would be able to sit for that long
of course.
and still maintain focus.
I completely understand. Yeah, no, the 3 hours is basically the duration of it, but I most of the time break it up because I usually can't sit that long. But it usually takes about 3 hours to complete all the assessments and do all the interpretation. So that's just kind of a window. But from there, we can break that up into whatever feels good for everyone. So yeah, drop your email. And then the last piece that I have is I do have a QR code there if you want to go ahead and enroll in that. And I also have my contact information. So as far as addressing this, I'm thinking of some folks who are going to be watching this recording. Well, how do I get my kid to do this? Or how do I broach this with them? Because obviously you're here watching this. I think my 2 cents on how to bring this up to your child is really coming from a place of like, hey, I really want to support you. I really want to understand what's in your best interest. And I think coming at it from a perspective of, I think this will be an opportunity to better understand who you are or better understand what you need. A lot of the times, especially for this young adult population, depending on if they've been in therapy or they've never been to therapy, it can be really intimidating to engage with a psychologist who you don't know and you have to be really vulnerable with, and it's a more long-term relationship. I've gotten a lot of resistance around that. And that is why I created this protocol, because I want these young adults to step in and be like, I'm here to get information. I'm here to get insight. And then whatever comes after that, I'm not attached to. I say sometimes you may never have to see me again. But my goal is that after, as I get more people interested in this protocol, my intention is actually to create a group for young adults. So this would be an online virtual group where we would come together as a community to be able to support each other with a parental component attached to it. So that is what is forecasting for the next few months, is really taking this protocol, this really rich information that each one of these individuals has received, and now what do we do with it? How do we make sense of it? How do we move forward with it? So I really do think that community piece is so important as we go through any transition, but particularly this one. And so I'm really excited to kind of be preparing to offer that in the new year for this community in particular. Any questions, comments, concerns? I'm done talking at you.
I just wanted to thank you for this presentation. As a parent and as somebody as a professional in the community as well. I did want to, if it's okay with you, I did want to connect with you on like a kind of a professional standpoint as well, being that I'm in that field and I'm going to be going into my own private practice as well. So
Amazing. Yes.
I'd like to connect with you on that as well, if that's all right.
Absolutely, Natalie. If you want to drop your email in the chat as well, I can go ahead and reach out to you directly.
Okay, I will do that.
Amazing. Well, I thank you both for being here today. Do you have any other particular questions or any comments you want to add before we close out?
Elena, I just wanted to say thank you as well. This webinar was so fantastic and super helpful. Natalie, great to meet you as well. Feel free to reach out to me because, like I said, being a mom in this position can be really lonely. And it's nice. I think it's really nice to have support. I find that a lot of parents just don't open up and talk about what's going on behind closed doors, and that can be really hard. So, Elena, thank you. This was fantastic. I will definitely talk with Brady. And then I'm also planning on, oh, I guess I wanted to know, will you send the recording to the emails? Because my husband was interested in watching too.
Yes, that's a great question, Suzanne. So yes, all recordings will go out in an email to everyone. So you'll be able to have access to that. I'm going to upload it to YouTube. So it'll be there for replay at your convenience.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, ladies. Well, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for being here again. I hope that you go and enjoy your Fridays, and thank you again.
Have a great day.
Bye, Natalie.
Bye.